Okay, thank you for the invitation. Also, I will start out with an apology for changing the title of my paper. I've rephrased it slightly, so the title is Of Other Materialities, Why Mobilities Design is Central to the Future of Mobilities Research. In the paper, I try to follow the line of argumentation that moves from a general level of mobilities research and try to see how a situational and pragmatic mobilities research perspective may lead to an increasing interaction with the design world, and in particular urban design and architectural practices as shaping the sites and stages for the contemporary acts of mobilities. Furthermore, I would be moving towards design in order to open up an interesting avenue to question the material. It's a little tricky to read my stuff. Just about. So any rubbish talk is because the light's out, right? The situational pragmatic take on mobilities design advocated here justifies speaking of other materialities. By this is meant that there's a different focus on the materials used in the spaces and sites hosting mobility practices, as well as understanding of the material in this perspective turns towards a more pragmatic understanding of the multisensorial mobile inhabitation in the contemporary world, which then again justifies a claim to look at other materialities. It all calls for a critical attention to materialities as an important dimension of mobilities research in the Routledge Handbook to Mobilities, in which they call for, and I quote, a focus on mobile materialities problematizes simplistic distinctions between humans and non-humans, and instead retunes attention towards the assemblage of matter that moves. So I wanted to speak about matter that moves, but also matter that facilitates or affords movement. So in this paper, I'm trying to point towards another material perspective and another way of engaging with these dimensions. And I'm standing up here because the pointer doesn't really do the thing. So, as argued elsewhere, the study of contemporary mobilities may profit from focusing on the concrete level of the situation, as well as there's much to be gained from looking towards the nexus between design and mobilities. And obviously, you spotted that this is my intersection point. That's between architecture and design and mobilities perspectives. Accordingly to a situational frame of mobilities, mobilities are understood as hybrid assemblages of bodies, things, spaces, cultures, and interactions that either comes into being through the attempts to design, control, manipulate, and orchestrate particular practices from above, as it were, or through choice, decisions, effects, change, encounters, and individual motives from below. Rather than seeing this framework as a binary structure of the analysis, it's an invitation to ask the pragmatic question: what makes this mobile situation possible? And further from this, to turn more directly towards design and architectures of such situations, or in other words, to turn towards mobilities design. The connection between mobilities turn and situational mobilities and mobilities design lie in the fact that the staging of mobility materializes within mobilities design. So, coming from the pragmatic question of what affords or makes a particular situation possible, we might expand that question to ask what design decisions and interventions afford, enable, or prevent concrete mobile situations. I want to speak a bit to the notion of affordance. In the book, The Ecological Approach to Visual Perception, James Gibson proposes that, quote, the affordances of the environment are what offers the animal what it provides or it furnishes, either for good or ill. Harry Heft critiqued this notion and argued for an action-based approach to this, and later on, to make a long story very short, Ingle raises some important critiques of Gibson's attempt to remit the social material distinction, which, according to Ingle, led Gibson to the unhelpful solution that suggested that the environment is a given in advance of all situations. I think the effect by extra situational properties or context dependencies, or whatever you want to call them, are crucial here. Ingle's solution is to discharge two notions altogether, substituting them with a holistic notion of ecology. This may be one feasible way to disentangle such fixed and block conceptualizations. Here, the situational and pragmatic approach to mobilities, including material spaces, technologies, bodies, sensations, values, and interactions, dynamics, is another. Furthermore, and in line with this paper, Ingle requests a refocus from the material towards materials in order to sharpen the attention to the multisensorial engagement with the felt and embodied experiences. Rather than focusing on the material in the abstract, looking at specific artifacts and its relational linkages with the multiple relevant entities defining the mobile situation is at the center here. Ingalls' ontology is one of holism and deep sensations, and I'll reference that quickly by using a quote from his 2011 book, where he talks about the stone. We might be inclined to say that the stone, bathed in moisture, is more stony than the one bathed in dry air. We should probably acknowledge that the appearances are just different. It is the same if we pick up the stone and feel it, or knock it against something else to make a noise. The dry stone feels and sounds different from the wet one. What we can conclude, however, is that since substance of the stone must be bathed in a medium of some kind, there is no way in which the stoniness can be understood as part of the ways it is caught up in the interchanging across its surface between medium and substance. Stoniness, then, is not the stone's nature in its materiality, nor is it merely in the mind of the observer or practitioner. Rather, it emerges through the stone's involvement with its total surroundings, including you, the observer, and from the manifold ways in which it's engaged in the currents of light worlds. So, in this rich and sensitive understanding of the stone, it may lead us to think about how to engage with other materialities, other both in the sense of having another understanding of materialities than the prevalent, but also in simply looking at other things. Somewhere along the discussion of the proposed mobilities design and as an emerging research field, and as yet another turn, may have provoked some people. As Anderson and Wiley rightly states, too much rematerialization and returning to the material may not actually have contributed much to the intellectual development of our understanding of the material. Furthermore, the assumption of the material as equal with the hard, the static, and the obdurate seems counterproductive to our comprehension of the world. I would put myself in line with Anderson and Wiley arguing for a material imagination. And I think the mobilities design perspective is one way of trying to embrace or engage with that. From this source of inspiration, we may think of other materialities, and in concert with Anderson and Wiley, argue that, quote, textures and densities, liquidities and radiances thus acts as sets of imperatives, within and through which movement and sensation are inspired and performed. Materiality, in this sense, reading, is multiple. The term connotes forces and processes that exceeds one state, solid, liquid, gas, and are defined ultimately in terms of movement, process, rather than stasis. I believe that to talk of other materialities as a shorthand for the different and much more sensual sensitivities to surfaces, structures, volumes, and spaces are what we may gain from looking at the material or the mobilities design perspective. Next to Ingalls' call for a holistic understanding of humans and non-humans in a dynamic and relational perspective, there's an interesting strand of thinking which to some extent is developed in tandem with his thoughts. I'm thinking here of the philosopher Jane Bennett and her advocacy for vibrant matter. In this perspective, Bennett argues that her main philosophical project is, quote, to think slowly an idea that runs fast through modern heads, the idea of matter as passive stuff, as raw, brute, or inert. This indeed is in accordance with Ingalls' claim to think about materials rather than material, and about things rather than objects, but also touch base with Latour's attempt to revalorize the importance of non-human actants, technologies, and artifacts. And in relation to mobilities design, the importance of materials shaping spaces like volumes, voids, edges, surfaces, and the affordances facilitating movement already point to a deeper understanding of such other materialities. En route to this, Bennett speaks of thing power. Thing power gestures toward, this is a quote, thing power gestures towards the strange ability of ordinary man-made items to exceed their status as objects and manifest traces of independence, of aliveness, constituting the outside of our own experiences. The term thing power for Bennett is thus a way of describing the, quote, curious ability of inanimate things to animate, to act, to produce effects, dramatic and subtle. Moreover, Bennett reminds us that this is not only the dead and inanimate artifacts that constitute vibrant materiality. Humans equally are material constitutions. And here the connection to the mobilities design and its sensitivity to the multisensorial systems, sites, and infrastructures creates a complex that create complex assemblages where materialities are not just external to the human, but rather permeable, as in a deep relationship of osmosis. The perspective of vibrant materialities may inspire research within mobilities design to think of such other materialities by supporting the argument around process dynamism and relations inherent in what at face value looks as the dead, inanimate objects. Rather, we should think about artifacts, sites, and systems as vibrant in their own terms, as actors facilitating, affording, and entangling mobile practices. The spatial confinements of this paper prevents me from going deeper into Bennett's argument, but she has an interesting observation around the political ecology of things that I think would be worthwhile exploring. The first step is engaging with mobilities design to comprehend the other materialities on their foundational level. The next will be starting reflecting upon the normative, ethical, and political dimensions. And this is corresponding to the double attention giving to potentials and dark sides within critical mobility thinking. So, I'll be moving to, I guess I can take a seat then. So this moves me to a few short reflections on the future agenda in mobilities research. The claim thus far has been that there's a need for a different way of addressing the material or the materiality of mobilities. The shortcomings of the existing frames of mind may be one way to realizing this, but the potential and new insights afforded by adjacent disciplines may be another. In this paper, I've tried to follow the potential of engaging with design disciplines in order to explore how such disciplinary framings may alter the relatively abstract vocabulary of the material in social sciences. The emerging discipline of mobilities design is such a new platform for rethinking the relationship between materiality and mobility. In this paper, I've tried to exemplify this relation, but needless, more work needs to be done. On the inside of the academic venture, this should hopefully provide more sensitive vocabularies and fine-grained vocabularies for understanding the mobile world. But I think this would be too introvert if there were no profit to be harvested outside academia as well. The future social challenges ranging from climate change, demographic shifts, technological innovation, etc., surely makes hands-on contribution from academics to global challenges more pertinent than ever. Here, the rethinking of materialities and the engagement with disciplines offering a more practical and hence pragmatic approach to the real-life practices should be most beneficial. The other ways of engaging materialities and the other materialities to be explored leads to a deeper engagement with the nexus of the corporeal embodied practices and the multisensorial engagement that these are expressions of. The lesson learned from engaging with the design world and with articulating a vocabulary of mobilities design is that it sensitizes us to detailed entanglements with matter, surfaces, volumes, physicality, etc., that we know are important for the sensorial experiences of mobile subjects enrolled into various systems and infrastructures, but which until now has been too superficially understood. So the focus on other materialities also point in the direction of a different relationship between the academic world and the public. In direct prolongation of this questioning of the politics of design should be launched. One possible strategy for encountering this is Latour and Weibel's strategy for rethinking democracy and the public as they did in their 2005 exhibition catalog. The pragmatic approach from mobilities design would offer more tangible experiments and engagement with public policies as well as citizens. Processes of co-creation, collaborative design, and mutual learning mediated through mobilities design projects should be explored. The philosophical underpinning of such new practices and analysis may be labeled material pragmatism, and to define such a philosophical stance is a future agenda to be explored. So far, the trajectory has led my own research from situational mobilities through the rough terrain of mobilities design and into the pragmatic understanding of materialities that has led to a rethinking and looking of other materialities as a vital precondition. Thank you. I should